Pastor Brian, coming to you again to talk a bit about the book of Leviticus. Now, there's a lot of rules, there's a lot of laws, and it gets a little bit boring, redundant, and confusing. I get that. But I want to talk to you just about, when I look at my Bible, what I see here. I see laws on holiness. Yes, but let's get down to the nitty-gritty about it. What about behaving honestly? I see about treating workers and co-workers and employees fairly, about the rights of people with disabilities there in Leviticus 19, and doing justice, loving your neighbor as yourself, and answering the question, who is my neighbor? And working for others as much as we work for ourselves. Trading fairly, business practices, ethical business practices. All these things seem like they are still very relevant to us today. Now you have to understand, you had people leaving the most civilized place in the world at that time, Egypt, and going to some place very barren, the desert, where there was no society, no economy. And what God is doing is setting up a holy economy, a way that life and business can run, but fairly and ethically and with justice. And so that's what God is setting up in the nitty-gritty. You've been working your way through that as you've been reading the book of Leviticus. Now the tail end, you get to this thing called the Sabbath year and the year of Jubilee. Sabbath year was every 7th year, and the year of Jubilee was every 50th year. And this can seem a little bit confusing, a little bit tricky. And really what's going on here is that this is protecting Israelites from becoming destitute, becoming so poor and never being able to recover, and handing that down from one generation to the next. Because in that world, you could become a slave, and then your child is born as a slave, and their child is born as a slave, and they could never get out of it. It was a cycle, an endless cycle. What God is providing for is this reality that no Israelite will become a slave of any other Israelite. In fact, what we see is that after 50 years, the year of Jubilee, any land that has been sold to provide for the family, because when they moved into the Promised Land, and let me back up, as moving into the Promised Land, every tribe, every family received a portion of the land. And that land was to be handed down one generation to the next. Now, if there was a problem and you needed money, you could sell the land. But then you sold your inheritance of the Holy Land. And that promised land that God had basically taken them out of Egypt to go claim. And so the idea was that never would that land forever leave the family. It would leave for a portion of that 50 years, but on that 50th Jubilee year, the land would be returned to the family. So there was no one, no family, that would be eternally destitute, that would be in the cycle of poverty that they could not get out of. And so the year of Jubilee was something to save Israelites from destitution. The Sabbath year and the year of Jubilee were about making sure that everyone was provided for, generation after generation.